Okay, so episode 11. I've got the guitar out of the paint booth and it is looking rather splendid, even if I do say so myself. This has been a little bit of a nightmare to get finished. As we saw in the last episode, I spurted out some white paint all over it, which I had to fix up. And then when I'd packed away all the cameras and I'd gone back to put some clear coats over the top of this off camera, the last clear coat I put on, it was like I sprayed it with milk. The whole thing went white and opaque and horrible. I thought I'd cocked it up. I went back inside to cry for a little bit, decided to leave it, went back to it the next evening and it had cleared up and everything's gone off and it's nice and dry. It's not hard. It's not really ready for its final polishing, but I want to get this one wrapped up as a series, if not as a guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of clean up the back a little bit, kind of do any little bits of rubbing down that need to be done on that, get it to a fairly nice finish, but I'm not going to polish it just yet. I'm going to leave that for a little bit longer. The top and the headstock I'm going to flat and polish to a nice high gloss finish, in the understanding that at some point in the future I'm going to have to redo it, because as this lacquer dries it will shrink back into the kind of grain on the top of this guitar, such as it is. But I'll get it polished up so it looks nice. We can assemble the guitar, we can do the finishing off work, get it set up, get it playing so we can have a hear what it sounds like. And then I'm going to put it to one side for a few weeks for this lacquer to properly cure. I can strip it back down off camera, get it all finished, and then this one will be going up for sale at some point in the near future. So if you like the look of this and you are interested, it will be up for sale, probably on eBay, so you can decide yourself how much you want to pay for it. But not wishing to get ahead of myself, we need to do the work on this top to at least get it looking nice for a demonstration. And what I've decided to do is a little bit of a hybrid of what I've done in the past. This Acrylix seems to be working really, really well, so I'm going to start with that. And I've got some 600 grit. And I'm just going to start kind of rubbing this. Until we're kind of getting through the texture on the top. I don't want to get rid of it totally. At least not with this grit of paper. I'm going to try and get you in a little bit closer and get the light right so you can see that there is actually a fair bit of texture on here that we need to kind of take out. And hopefully you'll be able to see there's some kind of bright spots where I've been running. Ignore that bit there because I haven't really rubbed too much on that, but through here you can see there's some quite small bright spots. I'm not going to get all of those out with the 600. I will kind of work my way down. My aim would be with the next grit, the 800, they'd be almost gone, just leaving kind of a few tiny little specks that need taking out with the further grits that we're going to use. I'm probably going to rub to about 1200 on this and then we'll go to polish. But for now, it's just a case of working through it with this 600. Okay, so I've been all the way over this now with some 600 paper, and I've got it down to a fairly flat finish. There are a few little areas where it needs a little bit more work, but mainly I've just got those very small kind of shiny spots just all over most of this. There are some areas which are very flat, and we've kind of got rid of a lot of them. Like I said, I'm not too bothered about the tiny little details at this stage. We can get those out with the finer grits of paper. And I've got some water on hand now, and we're going to go with some 800 wet and dry to kind of get this down to the next stage. But what I don't want to do is introduce a load of water into some aspects of this. So for instance, all these little screw holes, water getting into those wouldn't be particularly good. So what I'm going to do is just take some kind of paste wax and rub those into those little spots. And I'm going to try and keep the wax away from the top of this as much as possible, because it will kind of clog up my sandpaper. So I'm just going to poke some in with a cocktail stick. And I've got a few of these to do, so I won't show you them all because that would be a little bit dull and boring. But what I'm also going to do, once I've done all of these, is I'm going to try and mask the control cavity as best I can, because I'm not really going to be doing any rubbing down or anything in there. There really isn't much need for that. So I'll just try and kind of cover that up just to keep the water away from the finish, and also any of the polishing compound that I'm going to be using. I don't want that getting into there, because that's just going to kind of be really messy and a bit difficult to kind of clean up. So I'll crack on with that off camera and get ourselves ready for the next stage of this. And with that all kind of protected as best we can, I've just got some 800 grit paper there. It's been soaking in the kind of warm water for a few minutes just to soften it up a little bit. And I'm just going to use that, going in kind of small circles where I can, just to take this down to the kind of next level. Try and polish out some of those little low spots. And again, this doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, because we've still got a couple of grits of paper to go. We just need to be kind of working this towards a really, really consistent finish. Now, a lot of people, when they do this, they will go in one direction with one grit of paper, and then when they switch grits, they'll go in the other direction. And that's supposed to be a really good way of kind of discerning which scratches you're taking out, because if they're going that way and you're going that way, you can tell that they're the scratches from the previous paper. It sounds like a really good idea. I'll have to give that a bash one time and see how it works for me. And I can see where I am, that there's a few bits around here that still need a bit of work, but this section is mainly pretty good, and I'd be happy to leave that until the next grit to get that sorted out. So a little bit more in this section, and then we can move on to the other bits. The big thing to watch out for at this stage is when you're sanding up against edges, like around this pickup cavity and around the control cavity, because they will be your thin spots on your lacquer. So if you're not careful, you could quite easily sand through. That is why I always put a good radius around anything like that, just to kind of limit the chances of that happening. So again, I'm not going to bore you with hours and hours of sanding. I'll work my way through the 800 and get back to you for the next stage. Okay, so after lots and lots of rubbing, I'm down to a point where I'm happy with the 800 grit. So I've changed my water, I've got some fresh water in there, and I've also thrown away all of that 800 paper. The last thing I'd want to do is inadvertently pick a piece of that up once I'm 90% the way through rubbing down with the next grit of paper and introduce a load of horrible scratches into it. So that's all gone, it's in the bin, I can't make a mistake. So next up is I'm going to take some 1000 paper and do exactly the same. I am only going to rub down to 1200 grit and then we can start polishing this. I would say I'm probably about an hour and a half in now. So this is quite a long, drawn out job. You've got to have a little bit of patience. It really, really helps to have some good tunes on hand so you can just stick your earphones in and kind of have a little bit of entertainment while you're doing it. It is a little bit of a ball ache, I must admit, but it is well worth the results, as hopefully we'll see in a few hours' time. So again, wet and dry on my little rubber or eraser for our American friends. Rubber's something slightly different. And again, small circles, just work our way through. A few people have been asking me about the lack of shielding on this build and whether that's going to cause a problem with hum. Obviously the way I'm going about it, it leaves me limited options in terms of shielding. I'm probably going to paint these pickup cavities with some shielding paint. There's not a lot I can do about the control cavity, but I am using humbuckers, so hopefully that will be enough so that it won't be too much of a problem. We'll just have to see. I think ultimately it's one of those situations where there isn't a huge amount I can do about it, given the parameters of this build. And now we're on to the last grit. So this is 1200 grit, and I'm going to come off my little rubber block now, and I'm just going to do this with my fingers. People sometimes talk about rubbing hollows in with your fingers when you're doing this kind of stuff without a block, but with this grit of paper you literally have to rub in one spot for most of your life to kind of make any real impact in terms of a hollow or a dip. This grade of paper is literally just polishing out the scratch marks from the previous grit, which was 1000 grit, so those scratch marks aren't particularly deep. If you're using rougher paper, I would definitely say use a block, but I think for something like this it's actually counterproductive. So again, I'm just going to kind of keep working at this, concentrate on any low spots, but like I said, at this stage in the game, our primary focus is just to polish out the scratches from the previous grit. And I think if you catch this in the light, you can see it's already starting to take on quite a fine finish. So with the addition of some polishing compound, this should come up absolutely beautiful. And that's pretty much all rubbed down to 1200 now. It's really difficult to film, but I can kind of catch this in the light and see that it all looks to be a very consistent surface finish. So I think now it is time to break out a little bit of compound and get this thing polished up. But this is a very light guitar, and the mop does kind of give quite a lot of gripping pressure when you're polishing stuff. So I'm going to take this off the blocks and just put it onto this routing mat, which will kind of help the guitar grip the bench a bit more, and I'll be kind of less inclined to flick it across the workshop, because that is literally the last thing we want to do at this stage. Now this compound is my favourite compound. I've been using it for years. It's never let me down. It's basically designed to be used wet. And the action of the mop and the moisture kind of helps this stuff break down into a finer and finer paste as you're polishing. So it starts out with quite a lot of cutting power, but as you work through, that will actually reduce and reduce and give you a finer and finer finish. I've cleaned my mop out, even though it's got this blue colour on it, is clean and it is slightly damp. I don't really want it too fast. And I'm just going to work my way through, keeping the mop moving, and just see if we can polish the last of these little scratch marks out. And that, let's see if I can get it in the light, is actually starting to look really nice. That is not bad at all for a first pass, so I'm just going to repeat that. Might take a couple of goes to get it spot on, but we're getting very close. And that is looking pretty good. There are one or two little marks in it that perhaps could do with a little bit more work, but as I said at the beginning of this, I fully expect to have to go back over this at some point, because this lacquer is still very green and it is going to shrink back, and as it shrinks back it will kind of go back into the grain pattern on the top of this guitar. It'll be microscopic, a tiny little amount, but it will need a kind of another flash over just to get rid of that. But for the time being, I'll get some better shots, but I think that looks absolutely spot on. Very, very happy with it. I've got a lot of cleaning up work to do now, get rid of all this moisture and the kind of residue from the polishing process, but that won't take too long, I hope. I have burnt through a little bit on this edge, which is always a little bit of a risk, so at some stage I will just kind of blow that in with the airbrush and just then put a little bit more lacquer over that, and that can be polished up when we get to the final polishing stage in a few weeks. But other than that, the top has come out pretty nice. I am very happy with it. It's hard to kind of demonstrate how nice that figure looks underneath the lacquer, but it does look really, really good. I've also done the headstock. Again, I haven't gone too mad with it, but it is polished up and it'll be ready for a final polish in a few weeks' time when we get back onto this. So realistically, all this leaves now is a bit of cleaning up, a little bit of work on the paint on the back, but I'm going to do that off camera. And then next time we can start to get this assembled, wired up and put together. That's all for next time. So I'll see you in a few days' time. Until then, don't forget to hit the like button if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.